Welcome to the broadcast, everybody. It's going to be one of those mornings where I'm ready to jump out of my throne at any moment, because you know when you're expecting couriers, delivery people to come along at any moment, and whenever I'm speaking to you guys and recording, it makes me jump out of my throne when that bell goes off because I'm entirely focused on the matter at hand, and then I have to jump out of my throne, run along in all my fineries and jewels, and give the couriers and the Amazon delivery drivers a little bit of a surprise, but they always seem to quite enjoy it. And you know, I always like to meet gentlemen callers at the door in my fineries and jewels, and sometimes on all fours, but that's for a different show. Anyway, we have a new addition to the fruit basket, another one that I saw in a charity shop and couldn't resist. Meet Harold. What do you think? Isn't he absolutely gorgeous? I love him to bits. And I don't know what you think, but he reminds me a little bit of somebody we know. I don't know, some sort of dandelion affair going on. What do you think? So I thought that I would call him not Harry, not Henry, but Harold. So this is Harold, and he's my new butler. And every princess should have one, as Meghan will tell you. And he carts my jewels and gemmies my way on his back, burdened with glittering jewels just for me. Isn't that the way that every gentleman should... Oh, there we go. Every gentleman should behave. New boots! How fun. I'm going to kick off with my thoughts on the Crown, so if you want other royal goings on, skip ahead a bit in the video. But for the opening segment, I'm going to talk about the Crown, because I binge watched it over a couple of evenings, and I know lots of you have been watching it. For the first time in the kingdom, ratings have been published, and in the first day it got just over 1 million views. 1.1 million views. I think that is an underperformance as to what was expected, but we have to bear in mind the Netflix sort of service will accumulate ongoing views. People say it'll pick up over Christmas time, so it's different to terrestrial television. For example, I'm a Celebrity here in the kingdom with Mike Tindall. That got over 7 million views on its first night, so big difference there, but different styles of platform. So there you go. Well, there's certainly nothing to worry about with this series of The Crown, and perhaps even myself was a bit guilty of worrying a bit too much. I needn't have done. But I think I was basing that on the first few series, which was so well executed. We all know much of it was fictionalized, but so well done, and really got into the psyche of people's understanding of the royal family, which gave it a rather warped view, especially, I think, overseas. So there was that certain fear, but that certainly is not there with this series. It is not the same as earlier series. It's not as gripping. Perhaps it suffers from the fact that it's nearer in memory than all those, you know, the Queen's coronation, those kind of scenes that we saw beforehand. I also think that the casting is not excellent, and I think a lot of it is really rather poorly written. So much of what an actor is able to achieve depends on the script, the screenplay rather. And let's begin with a good thing, which is Diana. In this series, she's played by Elizabeth Debicki, who I didn't know much about. I knew that she was Australian, so I worried about the voice, and she absolutely nails it. I've got to commend The Crown. Firstly, for Emma Corrin in the last series. Emma Corrin, I thought, was a revelation. I thought she was splendid. She wasn't such a mimic of Diana, but she encapsulated Diana's spirit in the best way. It was the best casting. I thought I was really touched by her performance. I thought it was incredibly nuanced. Really great. And really great casting this time, but she suffers from a poor script, in my opinion, this Elizabeth Debicki. But, you know, in the world of performance, you can find great mimics, you can find great actors, but finding a combination of the both of them together is really something. And that's what you get. You don't just get a straightforward mimic impression of Diana, which would be vulgar. And you don't just get an artistic interpretation performance. You get a real blend of the two of them. And I was blown away with some moments. For anybody that studied Diana at all, the way that she inhabits the skin of Diana is as well as really anybody could do. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody get into that skin more. It's not the complete Diana, and lots of that is down to the script, which focused a lot more on the emotional distress, the darker times, rather than the joyous, playful side of Diana. That's what was missing, and that's what was missing throughout in all the characters. The Queen, for example. Imelda Staunton did a staunch job, and I know that she took it very seriously, but the direction and the script, it has every time a catastrophe comes to her or some sort of calamity impending, it's this expression on the face, and the Queen did it in the last series as well, the Olivia girl, and I just feel that it's such a misunderstanding of the Queen's indifference, the Queen's sense of humour. And I read a story, and I can't remember who it was by, but it was someone who knows the Queen, or knew the Queen and Philip well, and said that they often relished some of the drama because, or when things weren't quite working out as evenly before a state visit, and some little thing would go wrong and there'd be a drama at the last moment and people were afraid that they'd blow off, but they actually found it quite funny because it was something to break up the monotony and add some humour to the day. And I think that a lot of these times when people assume that the Queen would have been there stony-faced in alarm at certain goings-on, she would actually have been looking with a bit more calm amusement and a sort of sigh of, seen it all, done it all, my dear. I have no doubt that the Queen was capable of some introspection and self-reflection. She was a prayerful woman. Her life was prayer. So she must have had that in her constitution, but I think they focus too much on that predisposition and perhaps focus a bit too much on trying to bring out the humanity in her. For me, it just doesn't quite work. But at least that didn't trip over into caricature with the Queen, as it did for quite a few of the characters in this series of The Crown. I mean, it was always the way, really, with Margot, Princess Margaret. It was Leslie Manville in this one. And I felt sorry for Leslie Manville that she wasn't challenged. They reduce anybody that was a known smoker into some sort of chain-smoking lounger. And that's what you get with Princess Margaret. You know what's coming in every scene. There with the drink and a fag hanging out of her mouth. To this point where it becomes a sort of unrecognisable drag queen affair. Actually, I'm holding back a bit, I think, because I really like Leslie Manville. I've always enjoyed her performances and I find her very attractive. But it's a gift, the role of Princess Margaret. Now, I don't know what was held back by the director, so I can't lay all the blame on her shoulders, but what a gift it would be to play that part. She was grander, she spoke more grand than the Queen. She was... There's footage on YouTube that you can look at. She was the generation, and the Queen was too, but Margot was very much, had a rather intriguing mixture of old school, traditional, very deferential aspect of her nature. Less bitterness towards her sister the Queen, because she had a deep understanding of her constitutional role, and that was mixed with an attraction to all things bohemian she had acquired from her many friends and acquaintances in the arts and culture, and associations, Noel Coward, Cecil Beaton, the sunshine on Mustique, and she didn't suffer fools. She was lively and thoughtful and quick and could be decisive and wasn't just or even some tragic figure. Same with Camilla. Yes, she loves a smoke, but do we really have to have that hammered home in every single scene that she's chugging away there on a cigarette? It would be a bit more realistic if we saw more of Camilla out in the garden, getting her hands and knees dirty down in the mud, pruning a few bushes, that kind of thing. Having said that, it wasn't an awful rendition of Camilla by any means. It was quite enjoyable at some points. It was very fair-minded to Camilla, and surprisingly to Charles throughout the whole thing. They were quite kind to him at certain moments, as well as the sort of moments through a harsher lens. But I can't complain that there wasn't a sense of balance there from Peter Morgan, so I must give props there. Although I did notice that aside from the appearance of Hajnat Khan, it did gloss over all the rest of the gentleman callers Diana enjoyed. And when it came to the telephone conversation between Charles and Camilla, the Tampon Gate affair, as I said last week, I was excited that people might see it in its actual context instead of the headlines. And it did a really good job of that. So many people for the first time will be able to see an illustration that captures something of the truth of that phone call. I think they did dramatise it a little with Camilla laying on the bed. Oh, that's just what I need at the moment. Oh, I know it would revive me. I can't bear a Sunday night without you. Oh, darling, I just want you now. You're awfully good at feeling your way along. You revive me. You revive me. Desperately. I love it when she goes desperately. But I do miss you, Charles, when I heard the phone conversation, I imagined her sort of pottering around the house while she was doing this. She wasn't seriously lying down to get her rocks off. In my opinion, I think she was just pottering around, saying, "Oh yes, my dear, I do miss you, and I need you with every ounce of every fibre of my being, desperately, darling, desperately." But it was parts of it were quite funny seeing it played out. You could see that it was just, a saucy little moment, but kind of casual. And you could also see, and this was the main thing, that what he was saying about the tampon in particular was not that he wanted to be one. It was that he did not want to be one, which is always the thing that has bugged me most, because that is what haters will always say. He wants to be a tampon. No, he said he didn't want to be a tampon. So that context has been proliferated and will be seen by a lot of people. So I'm happy with that. Jonathan Pryce was competent. He's always competent. Many people think he's excellent, but he never takes me to the heights that I need to reach. And it was the same here with Philip. I didn't feel that he captured, I don't know if extrovert is the right word, but a sort of extrovert, sporting, competitive spirit within Philip's nature that almost came across as a sort of impatient undercurrents running through it, and that goading nature within him, that sense that he rather liked triggering people. Should we put it that way? I don't think that he really got there. It's difficult to pull off. I skipped the episode, I must confess, on Russia, the Russian royal family, the Romanovs, their death. And that episode also dealt with the friendship between Philip and old Snatchballs, as I used to call it, old Snatchballs, Penny Natchball. And I had no interest in seeing all of this fictionalised. There was quite a lot of John Major, played by Johnny Lee Miller. I thought it was a very one-dimensional performance. Again, not much lightness allowed to shine through in the character. Some of the more convivial, playful aspects of John Major's character, and even, dare I say, seductive, it was focused more on a sort of serious aspect of his personality, which just wasn't that enjoyable. Dominic West as Prince Charles suffered, I think, in comparison to Josh O'Connor from previous series, who I thought was absolutely fantastic. So nuanced and also incredibly dishy. I think Josh O'Connor is a handsome gentleman, as is Dominic West, but I was put off by he was demonstrating Charles's quirk of the facial features that he does, and I understand why he included that, and it was right to include it, but it became hammy after a while. Every punctuation throughout every sentence was carried off with this sort of grimace that Charles does, and it became distracting and a bit hammy, I'm afraid, and there was something bland about the performance. But again, much of that responsibility comes down to the writers. Marcia Warren, as the Queen Mother, gave a perfectly fine performance, but was absolutely nothing like the Queen Mother, who was gaiety itself, who was a fondant fancy, who was in love with life and had a light-heartedness. Yes, famous for being a steel marshmallow, for having that diamond core, but there was none of the confection and none of the radiance that people loved to be around, that sprinkling of glitter that she had. That perfect party hostess, Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, has been issuing thank you notelets. You know, she's so practically perfect in every way that she sends out those notelets. Some have emerged on social media. Alison Yarrow, who appeared in the Archetypes podcast, published her thank you note. Why couldn't she keep it private? Why does it have to be broadcast? Where is your marrow, Alison Yarrow? Where is your marrow? And it kicks off with her version of the royal cipher. Her crowned. Yes, this girl has the temerity to emblazon her stationery with a crown after disparaging the royal family, the institution, and claiming she doesn't care about titles. Why doesn't she just have an M? Dear Alison, she scrawls and scribes in this jejune, curlicued, contrived calligraphy. Great thanks for your contribution on Archetypes with a grand A. I appreciate your time and insight, as ever. Meg. Ali says, I've loved listening to Archetypes with Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. However, I'm partial to today's episode To Be or Not to Be because it does such important work, dissecting and trying to understand the archetype of the B. She doesn't use the word in episode, a choice I didn't expect. Perhaps I should have, but one that I really appreciate considering her incredible influence and reach. It's a word that I work hard to avoid because of what I know about where it comes from and how it's been used systematically to derogate women. Thrilled to be part of this meaningful project. Touched by this. What a load of 6-year-old primary school claptrap. The Queen Consort appeared in this Robin of Sherwood affair at the 94th Field of Remembrance at Westminster Abbey. She laid a cross in memory of soldiers, and there were 1,000 veterans gathered there. And there were some lovely photographs of her there with the green feather on display, working the crowds and making friends with one and all, including some furry friends. And if you're wondering what happened to that tyke that dared throw eggs at the King and Queen Consort, his bail conditions, it's quite funny actually. He is to keep 500 metres from the King at all times. He has been banned from that, and he's been he's been banned from carrying eggs in a public place. Banned from carrying eggs, and I saw a rather amusing cartoon with regards to this. He's going to be in court in December. He'll be dragged up to court. And he's been complaining because he's been receiving death threats, or so he says, from all over. Death threats for his behaviour. And he says he knows what fascism is. Well, he definitely deserves to get community service of some kind. I hope he doesn't get off scot-free. A few 100 hours of community service wouldn't go awry, would they? Because, yeah, people might raise a smile at the notion of chucking eggs. But I'm sorry. Nobody has the right to hurl an object at anybody, whether in protest or not. It's not on. As I suggested during the Queen's funeral, I said that if anyone wanted to protest Harry and Meghan, then a dignified form of protest would be to turn one's back as they approach. And I think that would be the same if you were minded to protest against the monarchy. That is a powerful and dignified way of showing your disapproval. Their Majesties also spent time in Doncaster and were greeted by vast crowds yet again. Some lovely curtsies. I really enjoyed this little moment between the little boy in the crowd giving a wave and the king. Camilla was brandishing a felt-tipped flag there, possibly a gift from somebody in the crowd, I don't know. And Charles was in his dashing camel coat, and we saw him under a beguiling portrait of the Queen. And he spoke with army veterans. And then there was a statue unveiling at York Minster. The statue that you see is on the front of this 850-year-old holy building at the entrance to York Cathedral, and it stands around 2 meters tall. It weighs over a ton, carved from French limestone. And what do you think of it? I rather like it. It's very difficult, isn't it? It seems almost impossible to entirely capture the Queen's expression and her quintessence, but they did an okay job. And it does remind me, though, of the Queen's lookalike. You know, the one that worked for 42 years. She was in Naked Gun, famously, the movie Naked Gun, and all over the place. Jeanette Charles, who is still with us. I often see her popping up for interviews here and there, even though she's retired. Jeanette Charles, she is 95 years old, bless her. The Times have been echoing the thoughts that many of you have mentioned to me. They've been calling for Big Willie to don a kilt when he's in Scotland, you know? Remember, he is now, along with becoming created Prince of Wales, he's also now replaced Charles as Duke of Rothesay when in Scotland, and Lord of the Isles. And I'll just read the opening of this piece because it made me giggle. His father, the king, likes nothing better than to show the royal kneecap when he heads north of the border, and his 3 times great grandfather designed the family tartan. He's talking about Prince Albert, who designed the Balmoral tartan in 1853. So why won't the Prince of Wales, newly appointed Duke of Rothesay and Lord of the Isles, ever wear a kilt to mark him out as the rightful heir to the throne of Scotland? I thought perhaps he's afraid of upskirting. You know, those people that stick a camera underneath unsuspecting skirts, that awful, disgraceful practice. Well, perhaps Big Willie is a bit scared that might happen to him, because we all know what a true Scotsman wears under his kilt. Goose egg. Mike Tindall has been regaling his campmates with stories of Zara's home birthing experience. Rapid it was, he said, when the 3rd one came along. By the time number 3 shot out, it was like one of those ping-pong balls from a ladyboy in Bangkok. It was rapid. She'd taken a bath, we learn, the Queen's granddaughter. She had just emerged from a bath, and he said she was standing there shaking. The legs were shaking, and akimbo, no doubt. She was barely standing. The midwife turned up and said, "No, you're not going to make this to hospital." They put down 2 gym mats down in the bathroom, and he said, "She almost choked me to death." How relatable. How relatable. For those of you that enjoy your royals, relatable. Congratulations. And here's a nice photograph from a true class act. The grandmother to a future king who would never be so vulgar as to adorn her stationery with a crown. It's our Christmas carol, surrounded by metallic balloons, showcasing 4 new festive collections for her brand Party Pieces. Carol's Christmas Picks. Thank you for joining me on the broadcast today, my old fruits. I hope you've got a splendid weekend ahead of you. I'm going to get old Harold here to make me a nice cup of tea and a buttery crumpet. How splendid for the afternoon. I'll see you next time. My tip jar is in the description box below, and I bid you good day. Ta-ra.